Well, hello again. Welcome again to another episode of Down to Earth but Heavenly Minded podcast. And I'm your host, Rich. And we're going to continuing on. I think we're in our fourth episode of the series on textbook for life. It's the Bible. And today we're going to be looking at uh, our first family. We looked at our first parents, but now we're going to be looking at their family today. So, with that said, let me just get that up here. Okay, we're in chapter 4 of Genesis, and this is the story of Cain and Abel, the two brothers. And many people know of this story, but has not looked at the significance of this story. Now, Adam knew Eve, his wife. This is kind of an important statement because anytime it talks about knowing in a sexual sense, uh, Adam had relations with his wife, so he knew her intimately, and this is where she conceives and she bears children. So it says, now Adam knew his wife. Yeah, he had relations, and she conceived and bore Cain. This is the firstborn. And I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Okay, so she is giving God credit for the birth of her first son. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now, Abel was a keeper of the sheep, and Cain was a worker of the ground. So one was a shepherd and the other one was a farmer. Now, there's nothing wrong with these professions. Either one of them are fine. But we're going to see something that happens. Now, Abel was a keeper of the sheep, and Cain worked the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. This is what I did, Lord. Look at, I worked hard. I grew these crops, and now I'm going to offer them to you. This really sounds good. And what's wrong with that? Well, it wasn't what the Lord required. Remember, the Lord was the first one to kill animals, the shedding of blood, to cover the nakedness of men and women. Well, that's why God did not accept this offering. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with it. It just was not the way God wanted things done. We have to do it God's way, not our way. So Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock, the very first one that was born, and the fat portion. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering. See? And when Abel offered his offering, there had to be a shedding of blood. But for Cain and his offering, he had no regards. And the reason for this is because it was not a blood sacrifice. It was just the fruit of his own labors. And how many times people want to work their way into God's mercy and in God's presence. That's not how we come to God. We come to God His way, not our way. So the requiring of blood was very important. And so we have to realize this. Now, what happened? So Cain was very angry and his face fell. In other words, he was really disappointed because God would not accept his offering. And how many religious people today are so offended when Christians tell them that God will not accept their worship and accept their work of their hands. You know, we think we can do penance. We think we can work our way to heaven. But we're going to see this throughout the entire Bible that people try to do this. And God says, no, I'm not going to accept you. And what is the Lord telling Cain? He says, if you do well, you will not if you do well, you will not be accepted. And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. You must, everybody must rule over the fact that they cannot appease God in their own merits. We cannot do anything to come into God's grace. And it's by grace we have been saved, not of ourselves. It's not of our works, lest we boast. But God has done it, everything, and we have to give him credit and worship for what he has done. Now, in the case of Abel, God is the one that created animal life. And what is Abel doing? He's offering something that God had done, not what he had done. And he had to shed innocent blood, and his sacrifice was accepted. And what happens? It goes on to say, it says, and if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. So Cain spoke to Abel, his brother. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. You see what happens in our hearts when we are not accepted by God because of our works, and we see someone who is accepted because of what God has provided. There's anger in the heart. That's why people turn against Christians. That's why the world is so hostile towards us, is that the fact that we are offering something that God has done for us in place of something that we have done, because we have no merits. So Cain rose up and killed his brother. Then the Lord said to Cain, see, the Lord knew what was going on. Where is Abel, your brother? And God puts that question to us just like he did in the very beginning. Who told you you were naked? Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? And he says, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? He was trying to hide the fact that he had killed his brother and buried him. And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Now did the blood speak now? But God knew, and it spoke volumes to God what man's heart was. And now you are cursed, he tells Cain, and you are cursed from the ground which has opened its mouth and received your brother's blood by your hand. What you work, when you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on earth. Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground and from your face, and I shall be hid. This is true today. Man has run and hid from God. He doesn't want to have anything to do with God. And God is the only source of life. And I'm talking about eternal life. Yes, we're going to die because of the curse. We're made of dust and we'll return to dust. But the fact is that we will still live on even after death. It's not annihilation. We just move from one realm to another. And there's so many things in the New Testament that are so beautiful. God's going to give us new bodies. He's prepared a place for us. He's so many things that he has done. And we will try to get to it, Lord willing. So he drives him away, and he is hidden from God. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. This is what, we talk about eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Man who takes life shall give his life in capital punishment. Well, then the Lord said to him, not so. If any man kills Cain, this was something that was a little different than what we have today, and things changed. And it's recorded in the textbook for life, the Bible. And we'll get to that eventually, Lord willing. Then the Lord said to him, not so. If any one kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. I don't know what this mark was, but he marked Cain, so don't touch him. And then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife. Okay, so now the progression is going on. Adam and Eve had children. Now their children are going to have children, and so on and so on and so on. Now Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built the city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. So here we see the first city being built by Cain, by fallen man, somebody who is not a Christian, not belonging to God. To Enoch was born Iran, and Iran fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Mentuah. Boy, these names are hard to pronounce. And he fathered Lamech, and Lamech took two wives. Now, this is the first time we see uh, the practice of taking more than one wife. We see things starting to happen that shouldn't be. God created one man and one woman, and that's the way it should be. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. So here we have Ada and Zillah, two wives. And Ada bore Jabal, okay, and he was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. So we start to see the earth starting to grow. The population is expanding. And his brother, whose name was Jabal, he was the father of all those who play lyres and pipes. So now we see the musicians coming on the scene. And Zillah also bore, now this is the second one, Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain, and he was the forger of all the instruments of bronze and iron. So we see these trades coming on, and the singers and the musicians and musicians. Pronounce set right, and Zillah, who, bore Tubal-Cain, and he was the forger of instruments of bronze and iron. So now we see these trades coming in. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Nemrah. And Laman said to his wife, Ada, and to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. And he followed in his ancestors' footsteps. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. So here we have another murderer. If Cain was revenged sevenfold, then Lamech's 77-fold. And Adam knew his wife again. Okay, we're going backwards now. We've seen the second murder, and Lamech is worried because of what he has done, and he's worried that his punishment will be 77-fold that of Cain. Now Adam knew his wife again, so here we have another sexual relationship, and she bore a son and called his name Seth, for she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. Now, I just want to take time just to mention that I believe that Eve thought this was the one that was going to, that was spoken about in the very first chapter, where God was going to cause the Messiah, the chosen one, the anointed one, the one that would deal with our sins, that it would come from Seth, that Seth was the one that would do this all. Well, she was wrong in one sense, but in another sense she was right, because we can trace this back. Now, God had appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. This is 7 from Adam. And that time people began to call upon the name of the Lord. So now we have a little turning point here, a revival, if you want to call it this, and they called upon the name of the Lord. So this, chapter actually ends on a good note. The people are starting to realize that they have to turn to God and do things God's way, not their way. So there's a little sunshine at the end of this chapter. So with that said, I'm just going to stop my recording here, and time moves on, and time does not stand still, and we all can attest to that because we are all getting older. So with that said, bye for now.